Hi, I'm Victoria Moran. I'm an author and podcaster in New York City. I went vegan in 1983, but there was a lot of history. I had actually gone vegetarian in 1969 because of yoga. I read all 3 books in the Kansas City, Missouri Public Library, where I lived at the time, and they said if you're going to be serious about yoga, you have to stop eating animals. Well, I loved animals and I wanted to do that anyway. That was easy. Veganism for me took longer. For one thing, I didn't even hear about it in the early days, but as I did, I knew it was right. But I was dealing with a binge eating disorder, and it took me getting recovery for that before I could be fully vegan. And once those 2 things coincided, I've been vegan ever since. I left 60 pounds back behind there somewhere in the Reagan administration, and I've never looked back. This is a beautiful way to live. The first thing that I noticed physically after going vegan was that for the first time in my life that I could remember, I went an entire calendar year without a cold or a sinus infection. And I'm sure that was because of the dairy connection. A lot of people have trouble with dairy and respiratory problems, but far more than anything physical, even losing the 60 pounds that I thought I would be stuck with for the rest of my life, was that once I went vegan, I felt clear. I knew that I couldn't save all the animals. I knew, and I know today, that tremendous suffering takes place every day that we live and breathe. And yet, I also know that I'm not directly contributing to that by my food choices and my clothing choices. And even though it will be a much better feeling when we can all say, hooray, the world is vegan, it feels good for now to be able to say, my world is vegan. I think the most important reason for being vegan is the reason that will get somebody to do it. I mean, obviously, we look at the state of the planet. That's something that everybody living on Earth has a stake in. We're all interested in our own health, sometimes too late, unfortunately. And almost everybody says that they care about animals. Well, for somebody like me, the animals come first. That's why I went vegan. That's what's kept me vegan all of these years. And the other reasons came along and following suit, and they're great too. I think that for me, there's also another reason, and that is spirituality. For my path of yoga, it's been in the teachings from the very beginning that ahimsa, nonviolence and reverence for life, is the very highest virtue. And to just aspire to that, and I know I fall short every single day, but at least in my diet, I'm not falling short. I know that with my food choices, with all my vegan lifestyle choices, I'm contributing to less death and less suffering of innocent animals. Now, that's my story. Should everybody be vegan? Well, of course I think so. When you have the idea of what the world would look like if there were universal veganism, or even almost universal veganism, it almost reminds me of the beautiful Isaiah prophecies in the Bible of how everything at some idyllic point in the future is going to be all peace and all love all the time. I really like that. But for individuals who are saying, hey, wait a minute, you've made the choice to be vegan, that's fine for you, I'm going to make this other choice. You know, I can't force anybody to make a different choice, but there are 2 things that I can do. One is that I can educate when people want to know. If they say, well, why don't you drink milk? You don't have to kill the cow to get the milk. I can very gently and kindly explain that cows have to have babies to give milk. It's amazing. People can have PhDs from MIT, and they're still not clear that cows are mammals. They're not milk machines. Cows don't give milk any more than humans give milk or cats give milk. You've got to have a baby. You've got to have kittens. You've got to have offspring for a mammalian female to produce milk. It's the same with cows. And so to be commercially viable, they're separated from the babies very, very early. It's painful. There's a lot of crying and grief and agony. And then they are inseminated year after year until they're used up and end up at the slaughterhouse. That's information not everybody has. It's not going to change everybody's mind. It might change somebody's mind. But the other thing that I like to say to these people is not much. I just live my life. So for me, I think that being happy, being functional, and certainly being healthy. I am 71 years old and doing just fine. And I think sometimes that all I have to do is live out in the world and kind of let the word get out that I'm 71. And then people are thinking, maybe this vegan thing is something I want to look into. My activism, my advocacy has really changed over the years. Last summer, I don't know, I had some free time. That was unusual. I don't have much of that. But I just decided to Google my maiden name. Now, I was married in 1977, so any use of that name goes back really far. And I found references, some newspaper articles to demonstrations and things that I had done back in the early 1970s. So at that time, I was out on the street a lot. I was protesting and picketing and carrying signs and writing letters to representatives and writing letters to newspapers. When my daughter was born in 1983, that part kind of slowed down a little bit, and I became more interested in writing and speaking and getting the word out in a more concentrated way to people who were open to hearing it. And at this point in my life, I'm writing, I'm speaking a lot on Zoom, obviously, in this day and age. And also, I do a podcast, which is absolutely wonderful because this is a way to bring in every aspect of the vegan lifestyle. Now, when I started my podcast, it's called Main Street Vegan. That's what a lot of things that I do are called. Back in 2012, I think there were 6 vegan podcasts, and now there are probably 300, which is wonderful. We need all the vegan outreach we can get. But what I find is that I need to be a little bit more focused. So I'm now saying the Main Street Vegan Podcast, the spiritual and spirited vegan podcast, because for me, as I said, the spiritual part of being vegan is really important. That's not going to be important to everybody, but if I can reach the people for whom it is, I'm going to have more effective outreach. I also, for the past 10 years, have been running Main Street Vegan Academy that trains and certifies vegan lifestyle coaches and educators. So to date, we have 530 graduate vegan lifestyle certified coaches in 6 continents around the world out there spreading the vegan message. And something brand new that I'm part of with my husband and 2 other interfaith ministers, I'm the only civilian, is something called the Compassion Consortium. This is kind of church for animal people. We are interfaith, interspiritual, and interspecies, so that people who feel that they just don't have their animal protection side celebrated at their church or synagogue or spiritual community, we can be a second home. And for people who have left a spiritual community, we're happy to be your first home. So I think what's important now for vegans is that we just test the waters and we see what's going to work. If that doesn't work, we'll try something else, because time is wasting in terms of the environmental situation for sure. So we need to be smart and we need to be daring. I actually have something else that's brand new. I'm going to be putting up online the No Cow Vow. And this is for people who are into yoga, as I am, because yoga is traditionally lacto-vegetarian. So many yogis are vegetarian, and they're very proud of being vegetarian, and many are very serious vegetarians. So they're not the kind that eat fish and claim to be vegetarian. Most don't even eat eggs, so they're almost vegan. But they don't necessarily relate to vegan. Vegan seems a little bit foreign, a little bit alien. So what I'm going to be asking is that people take a no-cow vow. You're already vegetarian, so for a period of time, ideally forever, let's just vow that the cow matters and we're not going to be consuming dairy either. My first challenge in going vegan, because I had struggled with overweight all my life, was the idea that with all those carbs, I would never lose weight, and I would be destined to obesity forever. Well, what happened in my case was the exact opposite. I was also in a recovery program for compulsive eaters, so I was getting the emotional stuff taken care of. But my food choices, too, contributed to being able to eat 3 rational meals a day. The weight fell off without even noticing, and I've kept it off for 37 years, which is probably some kind of record for the Guinness Book. But in addition to the good surprises that happened in that way, I gave birth to my daughter several months before I became vegan. And I looked down at her one day in the crib and knew that I just needed to raise her vegan. And that was also a big impetus for my finally taking it all the way. And one would think that raising a child in a Midwestern city in the 1980s, I would get a lot of flack from everywhere. But the truth is, I didn't. And I think part of that is that I just stood my ground. I never said to a pediatrician or the grandparents or the in-laws, well, I'm trying this thing and I'm not sure it's right, but I think it's a good idea. No, no, no. I just said, we're vegan. Here's the literature, so that they could know that the grandchild was going to be healthy. And that's it. I'm not asking your opinion. I'm not asking your advice. And I'm not asking your permission. I know this is right for myself, for my family, and it's just what I'm going to do. We actually had virtually no flack. At one point, somebody sent home from preschool a little note that said, you're missing one of the 4 food groups, and they checked off the dairy group. And I went in the next day with a full lecture planned, and I'm pretty sure that they never again told anybody that a child was missing something from the dairy group. So I think a lot of it is to be firm in your convictions, to be well educated and know what you're talking about, and to live rationally. What happens sometimes is that people get off on tangents and they think, well, maybe I don't really need to supplement B12, or maybe I don't have to think at all about nutrition, or whatever it might be. That's not going to help the cause, because anytime we have any sort of problem, people who don't like veganism are going to say, well, that problem comes because you're vegan. So problems are going to come just because we're human, and yet you want to avoid as many as possible, especially those that are dietary related. And particularly if you're raising children, you need to remember that vegan kids are getting more information than little people really need to have. They understand that there's a great deal of suffering in the world, that these beautiful innocent animals that they relate to so much are being eaten by people that they love, like grandma, or people that they respect, like their teacher. So we're expecting them to appropriate a lot of really sophisticated information. So we need to be there for them every step of the way. And I'm proud to say that my daughter, I'm not going to tell you her age, that's her business, but she is not only a lifelong vegan, she is a stunt performer and an aerialist. So no wimpy vegans around here. I suppose I could say that I regret not going vegan the day that I heard about it, but I don't really even regret that, because I don't know very many people who have been able to go vegan overnight. And if that was the only story I had to offer somebody out there in the world, they would feel like, oh, I could never do that. So I'm able to say to somebody who says, I bought some of that oat milk, isn't that great? That is so cool. And have you tried this other product that's vegan and wonderful? And to just help people know that any way of getting here is a great way of getting here. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I did it the way I did it. It's working just fine. I believe that most people who leave veganism do so for social reasons. They'll tell you these kind of vague things like, I used to be vegan, but I just didn't feel right. And if you press them a little bit, you find out that there's not a real definition to didn't feel right. It isn't that they were diagnosed with any condition, they just left. But when you talk a little bit longer, you find out maybe they got a new boyfriend and he was not into the vegan thing. Or maybe they just got tired of going to family dinners, being the only vegan, and having the brother-in-law make jokes about them. As humans, we're very gregarious, we're social beings, and it's absolutely important that in addition to being educated about basic plant-based nutrition, we also need to get our tribe. We need to be connected with people either in our local area or online or both, so that if somebody makes a joke about our food or whatever might happen, we've got people to fall back on and they can say, oh, that happened to me and here's how I handled it. So I think the main thing is to get yourself supported. You know, it's like being wrapped in a blanket of support by wonderful people who see the world the way that you see it. And we can trade information and ideas and recipes and hope with one another. This is an easy way to live. It is a blessed way to live. We just need some other people doing it so that we can always remember that. My favorite foods have changed in the past couple of years because the way that I'm keeping myself healthy these days is with Ayurveda. Ayurveda is a 5,000-year-old Indian healing philosophy that grew up alongside yoga. So it fits beautifully with yoga, and it's helped me so much as I'm getting older with my digestion and with my attitude. So I'm eating a lot of food that's comforting. So my body type in Ayurveda is called Vata, and we really appreciate warm, soothing kinds of food. So for example, I've eaten oatmeal a lot of the time for breakfast for many years, but now I make that oatmeal really soupy and creamy with rice milk or almond milk. And of course I put in all the wonderful superfoods like flax and blueberries and all of these things that we know are going to up our antioxidants, and spices. My goodness. If you had asked me 5 years ago, what are your favorite foods, I certainly wouldn't have said cinnamon, nutmeg, ashwagandha, hing, all these amazing kinds of herbs and spices. But I do consider them today foods, and I use them liberally. It used to be that my Christmas spices, you know, the cinnamon and the nutmeg and that kind of thing, I would freeze and get them out in December when I was going to be making cookies. And now I use those spices every single day, as well as savory spices like turmeric and hing, which is a wonderful Indian spice, and cumin. There's just no end to the wonderful spices that make any kind of food so delicious. So if I'm not having that oatmeal for breakfast, I might have an Ayurvedic chocolate shake. So I make a room temperature shake with a ripe banana, a little bit of cacao or carob, and then I put some of those magnificent morning spices in, and a little ground flax, and it's smooth and it's comforting, and it just works. So I also really, really love an Ayurvedic dish called khichdi. And khichdi is a beautiful blend of rice and some kind of split small beans. So you can use split mung beans or split lentils. And then you put in vegetables of your choice, fabulous spices. Again, we're going with the turmeric, the cumin, etc. And you cook it up. I do that in a slow cooker in the morning, so I have it for the big midday meal. And it's a kind of consistency that just makes you feel like you came home from school and maybe it was a rainy day and your mom or your grandma or your favorite aunt had made you some wonderful kind of soup or stew. So that's a great regular that we have around here. And of course, because I also have a husband who just loves wonderful vegan food, we'll do some of his favorites. Chili in the wintertime especially. He loves pasta any way you fix it. And every now and then he wants himself a good old Beyond Burger. get some information. It's all over the internet, and there are some wonderful classic books to help as well. Not to mention documentary film. This has really become a movement of film. So if you're interested in the environmental piece, watch Cowspiracy. If you're interested in the health piece, watch Forks Over Knives and What the Health. If you're just generally interested in why would somebody want to do this and how can I do it, there's a beautiful film called Vegucated, which takes 3 New Yorkers found on Craigslist and gets them to be vegan for a period of time. And of course, a film that I'm involved in, A Prayer for Compassion, if the spiritual part is of interest to you. And if you really want to know what's going on with animals, and this is going to take a little bit of courage to watch, but a film like Earthlings or Unity or Dominion really shows what's going on. And then if you never want to look at an awful image of animal abuse again, you don't have to, because you're no longer supporting it. And once you've got the information, start in your way, knowing the kind of person that you are. So for example, if you're somebody who hears about something and it resonates with you, you're just in. I did this yesterday, now my life is this way. But if you're somebody who likes to take things a little bit slower, that's also allowed. So you can stop certain foods and get used to that, and then drop some others. So a lot of people drop red meat first, which is fine, but if you're interested in animals saving lives, then why not stop chickens and eggs? This is because chickens are little, and a chicken does not feed a lot of people. Not that any animal should ever be expected to feed anybody, but just in the math and the reality, if you can get rid of the chickens and the eggs, you save so many lives. And then you can add on these other foods. And you know, once you get started, you'll change. You're going to change at a cellular level, and you're going to change at a spiritual level. And so the idea of, oh, how could I ever not have standard pizza with dairy cheese on it, that's just going to go away. The vegan cheeses are great these days, so you won't miss anything. But even before that was the case, I mean, when I went vegan, oh my goodness, the cheeses were horrible. They made Velveeta look good. But something changes inside. So you just don't want to be a part of that cruelty any longer. So think of it as like stepping on that moving walkway at the airport. You step on. It might not take you all the way to your gate, but it's going to help you get part way. So step on that vegan moving walkway today, as far as you can, as much as you can do right now, and stick with it. And just let it take you where it will. If your experience is anything like mine, it's going to take you to health and peace and joy, lots of terrific friends, and a feeling that your life really does have meaning that it didn't have before. There's so much out there. We're so lucky to be going vegan now and living vegan now. So I would recommend some of my favorite books, such as Eating Animals and Veganist. I would also recommend certain websites for just getting the answers that you need. If you need an answer about food or nutrition, nutritionfacts.org, Dr. Michael Greger's website, is brilliant. He has hundreds of really short videos, all taken from the medical literature, that's going to answer just about all of your nutrition questions. If you want some guidance for just getting started, PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, PCRM.org, has a 21-day vegan kickstart. If you're interested in animal issues, I love PETA. PETA is tried and true. They even have an area called PETA Prime for people over 50. And if you are interested in yoga, as I am, I would love to turn you on to a terrific podcast called Yoga is Vegan. That's hosted by Holly Scotus, and she is out there bringing vegan yogis together and showing the rest of this community that this tradition that brought us ahimsa, that brought us this beautiful idea of harmlessness and reverence for life, is indeed vegan, and we can all live it that way. I like the word vegan because it's been around for a long time and people finally know what it means. But I would encourage you not to think of changing your lifestyle to becoming something. It's not like converting to a religion. I used to be a this and now I am a that. Veganism is normal. Veganism is kind. Veganism is the human heart matured to the point of coming to see that we really are all in this together. So call yourself vegan, call yourself plant-based, call yourself vegetarian who took a no-cow vow. It doesn't matter what the word is. It matters that the action is kind and caring and sane and sustainable. And then I think we've got it all. My favorite quotation comes from Mahavira, who is a saint in the Jain tradition of India. And he said, "To every creature, their own life is very dear." I think that pretty much sums it up.